Please help me welcome Mark Friedberg. So you've worked with Darren twice before on Noah and the Whale. And this is a pretty big departure from what he normally does. Can you tell me about your relationship with him and the origin of this project?
I've known Darren a long time. We both came up in the indie 90s in New York, so we're kind of cut from the same cloth. We almost worked together a lot until Noah finally happened. So starting on a very big one was starting on a big Hollywood movie was kind of ironic, given where we both came from. But I think we also tried to bring that spirit to that movie. But the other movie we did was The Whale. So it just shows you it's a pretty big range. I think what they share is a sort of commitment to sadness that Darren seemed to have. And I think this was his attempt to try something a little different. He said, I want to try fun. And so I guess this is fun. I mean, it's fun to watch. It's an intense kind of fun. It's a bloody kind of fun. But that's really what he was trying to do, is celebrate cinema, celebrate storytelling, maybe a little light on the meaning for a minute, and try to make it about, what's fun about this movie, what's cool about this movie is how it's an action movie or it's a comedy. It actually has some kind of sentimental moments too. But it's a movie. It's a movie.
What was the most fun part of the movie for you then?
The cat.
Yeah. The film itself is really a love letter to New York, the Lower East Side especially. And I know that you and Darren were in New York during that time. Can you talk about recreating that atmosphere of 90s New York?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Darren introduced the movie the other night as his love letter to New York. We're both New York filmmakers. Everybody on this job was a New York filmmaker. And so it's certainly rooted in the Lower East Side. I don't talk about that. But it's also an exploration of lots of different neighborhoods or zones in the city, some of them defined by their culture, the Chinatown or the Russians in Brighton Beach or Flushing Meadow. There's even a few more places that we were. So Lower East Side, where Hank lives, is where a lot of us of a certain elder age spent our youths. And so Darren actually lives in the Lower East Side right now. I mean, he lives in the East Village, not too far from where we shot. Almost all of us all of us that worked on this film had at some point in our 20s had lived in the East Village. I'm sure a lot of people in the arts spent some of their 20s, some debaucherous nights in that part of the world. And I think the reason it was, first of all, it's set there because it's based on, Charlie wrote the book based on his experience living there, being a bartender at that time. But it was also a time when it was very loose and open down there back then. And if you had something to say, you painted it on the street. If you wanted to express yourself by what you wore it. People lived on the street. Didn't seem that big a deal. It was an encampment in a lot of ways. It was a hotbed of creativity, maybe a little bit of rebellious fun. And I think that also sort of speaks to this idea that Darren had. It's a dark kind of a fun, but it's fun. It's a youthful fun, I think, in a way. And even Hank, who's going through this intense, horrible, miserable nightmare, sort of manages to smile at the end a little bit.
What references did you and Darren talk about for the film? I think a lot of people probably call out After Hours, especially because Griffin Dunn appears right away.
Well, it's got an After Hours bearing. I mean, it's something that happens to somebody who had no idea it was coming, and all of a sudden, they're the center of somebody else's story in a kind of a way. And then casting Griffin was just a fun way of acknowledging that. Also a classic New York movie. That movie is shot in Tribeca, and any of you who've been in Tribeca lately ain't what it looks like. Now, we live down there, I can say that. But so yeah, I think we looked at certainly movies from that time, gritty movies from that time. But the funny thing was, in the time of our story, Pi actually comes out on video. So one of the fun parts of doing East Village, maybe the most fun part, was doing Kim's video and having Darren say that probably the biggest honor in his cinematic life, beyond the giant accolades he's received from all of the different awards and award circuits and festivals, was getting his own section at Kim's video when there was an Aronofsky section there. And so we actually had it in the window for rent. And there's pie stickers stuck around. But that's a movie that influenced how so many of us made movies, and here we are now, sort of looking at it as our own reference. So it's kind of interesting and kind of weird. But it wasn't. This isn't like a cinematic studies movie. We didn't go watch all the Kurosawas. We didn't do it that way. This was really about us, our experiences, and trying to make something for what for us felt original, even though it's a heist movie.
I think it feels like you guys had a lot of fun making the film. It's when he goes to Coney Island, it's hard not to think of Requiem for a Dream. Are there other Easter eggs throughout the film?
They're kind of Easter eggs. It's personal. Darren actually grew up out there, not too far from that part of the world. So in a way, he was so excited to drive the Scout and say, "Let's go to this street," and I have an idea where that should be. So I think. And that's probably also to do with how Requiem ended up out there. So it wasn't, I don't think, so much only to quote his own movies, but as much as it was for him to impart his life experience into this movie in a way, or for it to feel on some level, or for it to be somewhat personal. So, the book is a little bit different. There aren't Hasidic hitmen in the book. That was something also Darren came up with.
Can you talk about that?
We need more of them. Don't you think? Well, the funny thing was, they step in sort of midway third act, and all of a sudden it's like a new movie. I mean, I'm fairly sure, get ready for the prequel. Those guys were fun. It was pretty cool to watch these two Titan actors sort of put this on so seriously. They learned Yiddish to do it. But for me, it was an interesting experience because I had to come up with a Hasidic home, which is something I've been avoiding, strangely, for most of my life. Just because it's just hard to, how do you necessarily get it right? And there's a lot of ways to get it wrong. And probably there's a million ways to offend everybody, and it's still wrong. So we looked and we thought about it and we were figuring it out. And finally I said, what if we went to someone who was Hasidic's home and shot there? And everybody thought I was kind of crazy, because a lot of people in that part of our religion, my religion, thinks what I do is devil's work. We went with, but what we learned in exploring it is that there's actually it's really by neighborhood in New York. And in Crown Heights, it's a very different version of Hasidism. And we found a family that was kind of interested had never seen a movie, was kind of interested in participating. We really did our best to be very, very respectful. We were open about the fact that it would be Carol Kane, the mother of two hitmen on Sabbath, but it was before sundown, so it was okay. I guess for me, what was cool is I brought a lot of prejudice to that as a New Yorker growing up around that, and it was an eye-opening, kind of a community-opening experience. On Noah, we shot the interior of the Ark in the armory in Williamsburg. Huge, giant armory where we barely fit a very huge, giant portion of the Ark. But they were extremely curious what was going on in there, because it seemed biblical, and is there something they should know? And ultimately, we needed more time to shoot there, and they wouldn't let us do it. They moved us out. So we were all had our hackles up a little bit. And for me, it was, I think, a very cool experience to open up what we do to somebody who's not used to it, and to also be welcomed that way, and to also learn about. A lot of the decor in that was theirs, and it was quite beautiful, I thought, in a way. So,
please raise your hand if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Just bring the mic.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. A lot of things break in the movie in a lot of beautiful ways. Do you have a favorite prop or piece of furniture that shatters that you're like, dang, I really like that? That
might be the best question I've had in a while. the thing that we took the most time to break was the cars. And before we started principal photography, we went out to a very big parking lot in Rockland County with a bunch of cars, our effects guys, and we smashed the Camaros and we smashed the minivan. And you can tell, obviously, there's an analogy between the two of them. And Darren was incredibly scientific about where it had to hit on the bumper, and he had his tape measure out there. These cars going 150 miles an hour into a pole. Which we shot with very high-speed cameras. It was terrifying in a kind of a cool way. And it's also kind of beautiful in a kind of terrifying way. And I think that's very Aronofsky, the sort of beauty of terrible things and the terror of beautiful things. And as long as there's terror, it's okay. But probably the car, I would say, for me. I'm not a gun person or anything like that, so...
So I'm just wondering, besides maybe like the cars and some of the, the stop, the walk signs, don't walk signs, what stuff did you have to do to transport it back to the late 90s, the shots that you were doing on location?
Well, it's a different world, internet is pretty new in the 90s. Cell phones are pretty new in the 90s. A lot of what you see in advertising is printed. As far as the East Village goes, that's a very expensive place to live right now. We went over it with lots of graffiti and stickers, and we try to, you can put anything you want up. A lot of it, maybe the camera moves through pretty fast, but we really try to make it all not necessarily authentic, but ours. And so most of what you see there, most of those dilapidated buildings, we painted to look like that very, very carefully, artfully, heartfully, in a lot of ways. We looked at a lot of the street artists, specific street artists, and it wasn't arbitrary. These were known people, and they did their kind of art, and it was a thing that happened. It wasn't, maybe for some it was vandalism, but for a lot of other people it was community service. So that was a huge part of what we did. We really just a very concentrated area around where Hank lives, 6th and A, which is where Benny's Burritos was, and Kim's around the corner, Pyramid Street on the other corner. It was also kind of fun because there's still people living in the East Village who lived there then, and many of them are wearing the same clothes, and they shouldn't be. But they were so, right? Am I right? But they were so excited. Hi, Drew. They were so excited, I think, to see to sort of exalt in that moment for us all. There's Drew. He recorded the sound of this movie.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Let's see what he's got.
Hi. I have two questions, if that's okay. One is specifically about this film. I was wondering how many of the interior apartment sets were built versus locations that you shot at and then decorated yourself. And then I have an unrelated question after.
So Hank's apartment was built from the ground up. There's nothing there it's in a warehouse. And it needed its interior. Russ's apartment next door, the lobby, and part of the stairs. The stair part that goes out to the street was connected to the building, and there was a little bit of overlap. Yvonne's apartment was also built in the same complex, but it was built into a storage room. So we used the rear window and some of the other elements that were there, but the rest of that was built. As I mentioned, the Booby's house was a location that we found. The bar was a location that we found, but put a lot of work into the bar. That was, the opening of the film. I guess you asked about the 90s. Probably one of the most defining things of that neighborhood was its bars. And the bar we ended up shooting in, the Double Down, is a bar that's trying to be a 90s bar. That's sort of what they are, advertising themselves at. But in the bars in those days, everybody would just draw on the walls, and that was part of the idea of the story. That if you felt like expressing yourself, you just did. But a lot of the rest of the movie is kind of on the move. We built that little thing in Tulum out of sticks we found in the woods there. That was pretty fun. I don't think there was a lot more interiors. The wedding we built the exterior of the wedding, all that stuff that blows up into Brighton Beach, but the interior was a different club that we shot at for a day. Was there any other? There was other built sets.
No, I think
The basement of the bar, that was a built set. Thank you, Drew. So he goes down the hole in behind the bar, and then we pick him up on our stage over there.
And then my other question is, I'm currently production designing a short film, and I had a question about how do you make a budget that's not quite big enough work for the quality of the design that you want to make?
That's called filmmaking. That's all you ever do. That is what it is.
Exactly.
You're
But
not.
if you had to say something, since that is always the situation you're in, what are the little things that you
The
kind of...
secret trick is that if the thing you're trying to do is unaffordable, it's probably an opportunity to do something even cooler that doesn't cost so much money. So usually the answer is push your socks inside out. It's on the other side that you're not looking at. Usually the answer is in here, not in here, usually. It's why so many small films are sometimes so much more interesting than the movies that have all the money and can blow up all the cities and make all the spaceships, which is great and cool and fun and as fun as having giant muscles all the time. But maybe the inspired choice, the poetic choice might be the better one. A lot of things that happen in your life don't always happen in the exact place that they should happen. The best book you found didn't come from a bookstore necessarily. The most romantic meal you had might not have been in a candlelit restaurant, but might have been in a stall in Thailand somewhere. I think it's about what that's the fun part, I guess I would say, is someone is giving you an opportunity to do something cool. Right, Leon?
Yeah, no. Thanks so much, Mark. It was such a great ride.
Because you're
I'm
paying
just
for
curious. Yeah, I'll buy it. My question is, it's such a love note to New York, and I was just curious in terms of the book and what you, Darren, and other people in who worked on the film were putting things in that were not in the book, but were like B&H. It looked like with a black and white cookie, and I believe that was B&H or something like that, And Kim's was on St. Mark's, wasn't it?
No. There was a Kim's on A.
And that was. I'm just curious. Like those things, are you guys coming up and saying, "Remember that," and or are they in the book?
That's my job. Is like, what's the world? I mean, what's in this? Yes, what's in the script is Hank lives in the East Village. It doesn't say he lives on this street, around this corner, this place, or anything like that. We ended up picking the apartment exterior for the reasons of the way where the camera would go and the way that the distance from the stairs. Darren had some shots in his mind that we chose the apartment for. For me, it was also on a block that I thought was viable for us, and it wasn't until after we chose the block that we started to figure out all the things. We remembered Benny's. Everybody remembered Benny's. You can't not remember Benny's, but it was once we dug in and also realized how far our set was going to extend when we started figuring out the shots. And in fact, the Kim's shot wouldn't have been in the set. And when we discovered that if we just pushed another 50 yards down the street, we'd be at Kim's Video all of a sudden. We did. Everybody had ideas. The producer might have had an idea about a street artist that they loved or knew. Some of those guys, like Revs and Cost, those guys, actually Darren knows them and we called them, but then they got upset because they didn't like something I did. I don't know. It's the other thing about the Darren's team is his team is a lot like a family. A lot of those guys have been together since college. Jeremy, one of the producers, Ari, writer, producer, those are guys he's known from the very beginning. And there's a real camaraderie sense, and also have a lot of shared experiences. They all have known each other since the 90s. So I think we were all throwing in. Charlie, who wrote the book and wrote the script, which is not normal, was around all the time and was a real voice in it, like almost like a technical advisor, sort of alcoholic bartender advisor guy. Not that he is, but wrote that character, and I think there's some of him in it. But he knew what was that Cherry Tavern? Cherry Tavern was across the street from him, and that is a real place. But it was like a place where everybody had sort of a moment they don't want to talk about, and it ended up as his T-shirt.
remember.
So yeah, I guess it was a very sort of a very specific kind of a love letter or a celebration of a New York that's fleeting. It's really like also some of the neighborhoods we picked was because you could still do the 90s in Chinatown, and there's a lot of other places you can't. Certainly can't do Chelsea anymore.
And just sorry for am I bringing just the World's Fair from like Men in Black and stuff into my head? Just I'm making association that you guys never thought of.
I don't think we considered Men in Black ever.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever have.
I would
until
think
right
it's
now.
sort of
This is
surprised
it.
that you were.
You're all
was like
seeing it live. I'm doing it now. I'm considering it. It's not working.
no,
No, I think we knew we wanted to be in Flushing. I think that was originally scripted for the East, for the FDR, the East River where the ball fields are, and where the Lower East Sliders used to play, and then it was too tricky to shoot a car chase scene there, and it's also under construction right now. And somebody had I think it might have been location. Somebody had no, it was our location scout. He pitched doing it out at Flushing Meadow because that's a place you could do. And then Darren saw the Unisphere and it was all over. So they got the drone to fly through the Unisphere. It's just tricky to do, but that's a cool shot. So yeah, we gave good drone on this.
I love the film. I was just wondering, how did you make sure that every vehicle on the streets in every shot was from the 90s or before?
Yeah. Well, we know the parameters more or less of where we're trying to see, and we can see in the camera what's there. So if, sometimes you're one shot, you might, if you really pay attention, see a car that's in that shot, also in that shot. But please don't tell anyone. But we have a person who's responsible for picture cars. They're the picture car coordinator. We talk about what we actually have conversations of in this neighborhood, in this time, they might be these kinds of cars. And in the Lower East Side or East Village in the 90s, they're going to be, cars that young people can afford. Russ's car was the most fun set of the whole movie. That was the Russ hole. So Paul Weatherhead was the picture car coordinator. So his responsibility is to bring kind of hero cars around. And then a lot of the background artists, extras, sometimes would come with their cars, or we would hire them that way. So we would pick them with their cars. But it's a big part of it. And, it's the most obvious, usually the most obvious way to tell the period is by the cars. So you have to get that right. If you pay attention and watch New York movies made in certain times, you'll see some cars again. So. No, but on a set last week, somebody sent me a picture of the Camaro, which was not supposed to be there. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not a clean business. Avoid it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it.
So you have Highest to Lowest and Caught Stealing out at the same time. They're both playing here. And Jim Jarmusch's film is premiering next week in Venice.
Venice. Wow.
Venice.
Have you seen it? It's so good. That's really good.
Were you working on all three at the same time?
I was doing Jim's and to Spike, but everything was done by the time Darren started.
How are you adapting your approach when you have all those films compressed like that? We have different
In a
styles.
Jim set, you take everything out of the location, and in other sets, you bring them stuff in. All right, pretty much. Jim's movies are poetic, philosophical wonder experiences that you get to have once in a blue moon. I mean, to get to do that is really remarkable. But to get to work with Jim and Spike and Darren one year was a pretty good New York kind of year, and I like New York filmmakers. Them's the ones I like.
And you're already on a new project?
The Brazilian filmmaker Fernando Moraes. You doing it? Yeah. Oh, good. He's such a nice guy. Fernando Moraes directed City of God, Constant Gardener, Two Popes. I don't know. He's also just smart and cool and older than me somehow. Doesn't seem it. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you guys.
Questions?
Thanks for coming to the cinema. Cinema.
Questions?
Oh.
I need a mic.
Come on. We just said goodbye.
Yeah. Because you're such a pivotal part of the production and pre-production, how much are you involved in post? Because I'd imagine like lighting is something that makes a film very constant, but like, yeah, how much are you
I think
overseeing?
it depends on the movie. So if it's a movie that has a lot of visual effects, I would be involved to help make those right. But if it's a movie like this, which was pretty straightforward, there was obviously things to erase, and we helped provide reference for the Twin Towers and what buildings should be. But for the most part, it's to do with VFX. I mean, some directors, depends. Like, you know, some directors really want your opinions on it, but there's not a job for a production designer in post necessarily. So it's more the front end about figuring out the culture and the world that the story is going to take place in. And it's very interesting to see how that translates to in post, because it's not always exactly what you imagined. Sometimes for the better and sometimes not. Okay. Can I say goodbye now? Goodbye. Thank you.